Welcome to a Thursday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, Joe Mullinax, with Damichael Cole. We are going to be talking about Ja Morant once again under NBA investigation, or not so much regarding actions taken during the Golden State Warriors game. We're going to talk about Draymond Green and Jaren Jackson Jr. Is Draymond right about Triple J? And we'll preview, hopefully, a winnable basketball game for Memphis in Miami. Here we are, Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Grizzlies. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host, Damichael Cole. He is the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. Make sure you're following him on X. Make sure you're following me at Joe Mullinax, and make sure you are liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing wherever you get podcasts to make Locked On Grizzlies part of your NBA and Memphis Grizzlies content consumption each and every time that an episode drops. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Damichael, it's been an interesting day.
It's always interesting over here, yeah.
I thought that, we would be talking about coaching candidates because I talked about that on the last episode, and you briefly discussed that, but haven't had a chance to dive in too much to it. I had a vision in my mind for what this episode would look like, and then, Shams Charania of ESPN decided to put a little bit of a wrinkle in our plans, posting the following on X. And again, it's very convenient that he left out the part about Buddy Hield, but Shams Charania on X. The NBA is looking into Memphis's Ja Morant using finger gun motions toward the Golden State Warriors bench last night. Sources tell me and Tim McMahon. Yes, that Tim McMahon, the most hated McMahon in Memphis, if I had to guess, and that's my statement, not Damichael's. The league's probe will also look into a gesture by Warriors guard Buddy Hield ahead of Morant, sources said. This was a secondary post, I want to stress, not the first one. It would have fit in the first one, Damichael, but Shams thought better of it, for clicks. League officials will talk to involved parties as soon as Wednesday. Now, my understanding of this, and you obviously were there, Damichael, so you can give better insight than me, but from consuming the media, Buddy Hield did it first, and then Ja Morant responded. The two teams were pretty chippy the entire night. I agree with the idea that it's not much of a rivalry with the Warriors winning as often as they do against the Grizzlies, but if there is a rivalry, it would be with Memphis and Golden State. So them getting chippy is not too surprising. And to be honest with you, if the Warriors are the ones that reported this, that's not too surprising because of the chippy nature of the relationship. However, it was much ado about nothing to me. This hasn't really been a thing all season for Ja. When he's missed games, it's been because of injury, not because of anything else.
Yeah.
So this was kind of like opening up old scars, pouring salt into old wounds in a lot of ways, and to me, it definitely feels like content farming. Not a ton there. I don't see the need for this to be a thing, and maybe you can add some insight. Maybe it's not a thing, and the way that it was reported is the problem. But what is your takeaway from being there on the ground in Memphis, seeing all this transpire? Why is the NBA looking into this at all? This should be much ado about nothing, right?
Yeah, I see, just general reaction. I know some people are going to say, oh, the league's picking on Ja and things of that nature. And I want to be clear, to my understanding, this is more so at this point like a standard procedure thing. And what I mean by that is I don't think it gets out there as the league is the aggressors of this situation more so than people are reaching out to the league. They're saying, hey, did you see this video? What's going to be done about this? What is this about? What do you think of this? And the league, when the league receives those type of comments, from reporters and things like that, the league has to say, okay, we're looking into it. We're going to get back to you when we know more. In any line of business out there, that's how things work. You report something, they say, hey, we're looking into it. We'll let you know more. That's all this is to this point. To my understanding, if it's become more, since we recorded this or whatever the case may be, that'll be the case. But the initial reporting, the way it was worded, like you mentioned Shams, his report. Actually, USA Today, Jeff Zilgett was the first one to put this out there, and he said that it's likely to be reviewed. That was his wording. He said likely to be reviewed. Shams Charania said the league and Tim McMahon put the story out there saying the league is investigating it. All it is to gather from that situation is, one, the league saw it. Two, they're going to look at it. They're going to determine something. The real news will be what comes of this, right? And if you're asking me, I don't think much will come of it. It could be some type of warning or whatever the case may be, because additional context here, it's a celebration, right? I know, Joe, before we recorded, you talked about, college players doing it and things like that. I know some people have pointed out, LeBron has done certain, iterations of gun celebrations in the past. Dyson Daniels has done, a gun celebration, as well. The Grizzlies actually do a similar celebration. When they make 3-pointers, they point at their own bench. Sometimes when they shoot in the face of a player, they'll point at the player while running up the court. Ja Morant, Scottie Pippen Jr., several other Grizzlies players sometimes, get involved with it as well. It's just a celebration. What makes this one stand out, like why we're talking about this right now, one, because it was against the Golden State Warriors. That's the number one reason. Two, because this happened during a timeout. So this isn't exactly a celebration. Whereas most times, actually in the same game, Ja Morant did it a couple times. He made some 3-pointers. T. Morant does it too. T. Morant sitting courtside, him and Ja will point at the opposing player, whatever the case may be. And that's what you see, right? So this is something, as someone who watches the team a whole bunch, I see this all the time. What made this situation different and why it's gained the traction that it has is because Ja Morant was walking, to the Grizzlies bench, and he's looking back at the Warriors bench, and Buddy Hield's looking towards him, and they're both kind of doing the little gun celebration or whatever you want to call it towards one another. So that's what makes this situation stand out. I don't think much will come of this. I've been wrong before. I mean, sometimes maybe the league is more serious about these finger gun things or whatever the case maybe than I think they are. Look, I don't want to go down that whole rabbit hole, but Joe, we've talked about it before, so I feel like it's okay to mention it. But there are some other things that are going on in the league right now where guys, should really be looked into, and they've done worse than point finger guns during celebrations or whatever the case may be. So look, not making an excuse, I do want to point this out because I haven't said this yet. It is, to me, this whole type of gun celebrations for Ja Morant should be kind of a read the room thing. If I'm Ja Morant now, because this is twofold. So I understand the devil's advocate to this would be, no, you want Ja Morant to completely be himself, unfiltered, whatever the case may be. I get that. I want Ja Morant to be himself, unfiltered too, but I want Ja Morant to be very cautious of, maybe I'm not the one that can really do the gun celebrations or something. Maybe I should just do the bow and arrow, right? You remember the Jamal Murray bow and arrow where he takes the bow and arrow and releases it? Maybe
very medieval of him, yes.
Yeah. Maybe Ja could do something like that, or throw up the three-point sign in the air, something like that. Like, you do have to be a little bit, it's like a read the room thing. Like, hey, look, I got in trouble for this before, so I'm probably not the player that should be joining the other players around the league in that particular celebration. So I want to point that out. There is a self-awareness part of this to Ja Morant. But at the same time, I'm all for Ja being himself. And it's just, you gotta tinker some things a little bit. That's all I think from this. I don't think anything much will come of it. I think just the wording that we saw yesterday made it look like the league was kind of like pouncing on Ja. To my understanding, that's not the case. It's more of, we're going to do the due diligence or the standard procedure because people have reached out to the league asking for comment, asking for clarity on what this is.
Any chance I get to belittle the worst commissioner,
I know where you're going. I knew it.
Professional sports spectrum, Adam Silver, I'm happy to do it. Okay. The fact that Miles Bridges, and we're not going to go down this road. Okay. Just Google Miles Bridges, and eventually you'll come across what I'm talking about. He makes $27 million this season, I do believe is the number. And we're talking about a gun celebration.
I mean, didn't the Grizzlies just played against Jackson Hayes, right? Didn't he?
Jackson Hayes would be another great example. Whatever became of that investigation, Adam Silver? Or is it because he plays for the team that LeBron James plays for that investigation just Oh, I don't know. Oh, man. I guess we just plumb forgot about that one. So whether it's Jackson Hayes or Miles Bridges, I say the same thing about the NFL. There are people in your line of work, MLB, literally every sport, that have a little bit more on the ledger than Ja Morant does. Maybe we just leave this one alone. And to your point, Damichael, you're probably right. You know more about this than me. It might be hey, this happened. Take a look. Okay, nothing about it. Let's move on. Certainly possible. I agree with you that I wish Ja had a little bit more self-awareness.
Yeah.
But I said this on X. I am past the point of expecting Ja to be what I want him to be, because that's not fair to him. That's my expectation that I'm projecting onto Ja.
Yeah.
He is going to be himself. I do think Isolo deserves credit. That's probably going to be more allowed than it was, at least on the basketball court, than it was with Taylor Jenkins. I feel like Ja doing that celebration, if that puts him in the right headspace to be the guy that they're going to need to dig out of the hole that they've dug for themselves, so be it. Let Damichael and I know in the comments. Hit us up on X at Damichael C, at Joe Mullinax. Much ado about nothing getting looked into. Adam Silver stinks. I want to stress that's my opinion, not Damichael Cole's opinion. Let us know what you're thinking in the comments. When we come back, an opinion that I actually did kind of like, if I'm being honest, Damichael Cole. There's an alternate universe where Draymond Green is a member of the Memphis Grizzlies, and he had some interesting takes on Jaren Jackson Jr. that we're going to talk about next. Stick around. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. The NCAA tournament is here. The Final Four is fast approaching, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the net. I don't know about you, Damichael, but this whole 4 number 1 seeds thing has got me through a loop. I have no idea who the true underdog is this year, but FanDuel makes it easy to back anyone with spreads, totals, and game props. Plus, the FanDuel app is simple to use. When you win, you get paid instantly with no waiting around. And with the Final Four approaching, there's always going to be something exciting on regarding college basketball, and this weekend is no exception. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. So, Damichael, I made mention of this a moment ago, and again, I realize it's a bit difficult to give proper praise to Draymond Green.
You got to consider the messenger sometimes, huh?
Yeah. And again, if we're talking about people that maybe Memphians don't like so much, Draymond Green is probably near the top of that list when it comes to basketball, at least. Draymond Green, and this via Anthony Slater on X, and I know you talked about having folks from the Commercial Appeal there that were part of this post-game availability as well. But Anthony Slater at Anthony V. Slater tweeted out the full clip. He quoted Draymond Green on Jaren Jackson Jr. He's too good to still be getting in foul trouble. A couple of those he picked up. He can stay away from those. It's time for him to take that next step in that department. Now, I do think this is a bit overblown, right? Jaren has improved in the fouling department. He's certainly not what he was a couple of years ago.
Yep.
But the timeliness of this is fair. This was the biggest game of the season to this point for Memphis. They needed their best player this season on the court, and they didn't have him. And it's not an accident that the Golden State Warriors went on the run they went on when Jaren was fouled out of the game. I think those are fair points to make. Draymond Green has that Michigan State connection with Jaren, so he probably feels a little bit more comfortable making the statements that he did. That is very real. I know you know that. The Spartan brother thing is, they don't talk about it as much as they talk about it at Duke, but the Tom Izzo connection is very real for those Michigan State alumni. And I think that, Draymond didn't necessarily say anything that was wrong. Is this a case where the messenger is the problem and the message isn't? Because to me, taking in that content, I wish that was something that Taylor Jenkins would have said. And maybe it was at some point something that Taylor Jenkins said, or something that Tuomas Isolo would say to Taylor or to Jaren Jackson Jr. Somebody that would have the ear of Jaren, that would put that in his frame of mind, a Marcus Smart before everything went wrong there. No lies were detected, but it might be a better messenger would have been good in this particular instance.
Yeah, it's a tough critique, right? Like, I don't want to put anything in the mouth of Taylor Jenkins or anyone with the Grizzlies, But, usually around here we would hear something around the sort of, yeah, he's just got to keep working. He's just got to keep working or something like that. This was, hey, I'm disappointed in him. He's 7 years in now. Like, he's got to cut that out. And that's how a lot of people feel. And hearing an NBA player who has the credibility, like, Jaren Jackson Jr. is a defensive player of the year winner. So it's like, hey, what are you talking about here? But Draymond is one of those guys. I can say that about him. I got the credentials that he has. I think, it's a fair criticism. It's one that makes a lot of sense. And it's funny because you've pointed it out. I've pointed it out how he's improved, with the fouls. But at the end of the day, if you just look at the raw numbers, now we'll talk about that in a second. But if you look at just the raw numbers, like, this is a guy for his career, he averages 3.6 fouls per game. And this year he's at 3.4. So it's not really that much of a difference. But when you watch the games, I think I pointed out, now it's not 2 fouls in the first quarter or 3 fouls in the first half, but it's 1 foul in the first quarter, then it's 2 fouls in the first half, and then maybe 3 fouls after 3 quarters, and maybe he picks up that 4th foul in the fourth quarter instead of going to the fourth quarter with 4 fouls a lot like he did in the past and having to be kind of on a minutes restriction, up to that point of the game. So it's smarter fouling, but what we saw in that Golden State game was 2 fouls early on. I mean, both of the first quarter fouls were like, hit yourself on the head, like, what are you doing? And Jaren has a bunch of those. I call them like little, like goofy fouls. Like it's just clumsiness. Like you just, end up tripping over a guy's foot or just, pushing a guy in the back when you don't have to. Those type of things. I do agree with the fact that he is too old to be making those same mistakes. And I do want to point out that we talked to Jaren after the game too, and he pretty much said the same thing. Jaren said that can't happen. He mentioned that he has to be better in this area too. So it's not for a lack of awareness. I mean, honestly, I just think you look at the fouls. I mean, it's not like he's overly aggressive from the standpoint of, I'm trying to think of a player who fouls that way, like Dylan Brooks, right? Dylan Brooks commits a lot of fouls just from being very physical, with guys. He fouls a lot. But in Jaren's case, it's like I said, he's tripping over a guy's foot or two guys are going for a loose ball and he pushes the other guy out of the way and they call a loose ball foul on him. Like, he picks up a lot of those types of fouls too. So it seems like he just cleans up on mental mistakes. He could improve in that area. But yeah, Draymond's statement was correct, Joe.
Let me ask you a truly hypothetical situation. I'm putting you in a tough spot. I'm admitting that. You probably know where I'm going with this.
I think I do.
Again, there's an alternate universe where Draymond Green is a member of the Memphis Grizzlies, right? Multiple outlets have reported that now. It's almost as common knowledge at this point as Dorian Finney-Smith, Cam Johnson, those trades being close to completion, and Brooklyn, for whatever reason, it not working out.
Yeah.
Draymond Green, it's been reported numerous times that he was fairly close to signing with the Memphis Grizzlies. He himself said it on his own podcast. Yep. It's been reported by others on ESPN, by, local media, of course.
Yep.
How different is this season if Draymond Green is a member of the Memphis Grizzlies and Marcus Smart is not? Because obviously the team, it's hard to project that because almost certainly Zach Edey's not here, right? Yep. It would be some other sort of pick that would be in that place. But if you look at a team that has Ja, Jaren, Dez, with Draymond Green as the quote-unquote spirit animal, does that help? Does that hurt? What would have been – what might have been, I guess, is what I'm trying to ask you. And again, I know that's really hard to put in the context and perspective, but with Draymond, the way that he is, the way that he spoke about Jaren in that media moment, would that translate – to these guys, do you think? You know them better than just about anybody from a media perspective.
I think him being a champion and look, him and Ja have been, like they've had their battles and whatnot, but at the end of the game, I saw it with my own eyes. Ja Morant, Draymond Green go up to each other, they dap each other up, give each other big hugs. Draymond Green has a really good relationship with T. Morant as well. I know like he's invited, the Morants over to his home, before for a basketball game out there in the Bay Area. I don't know if they win or anything, but I know he's extended the invite. Like that just goes to show kind of, how he feels, about them, so to speak. So when you factor that part of it in, like I think the adjustment would have been difficult. On the court, it would have been different because of, one, the Dillon Brooks factor. Like, I think that was the season where Dillon Brooks was going into his last season. So they would have had to kind of figure that part of it out, or whatever the case may be. Other than that, maybe rebounding would have been still, and it's funny because that's always been a question for the Warriors. Even during all those years they were winning championships, they were never the greatest rebounding team when they went small. But Draymond Green on the defensive end was a really good rim protector. That would still allow Jaren to kind of free and roam. And the way I look at it, look how successful Brandon Clark and Jaren Jackson Jr. are as a Tatum, in particular because of the way they can kind of, interchangeable. They're so interchangeable on defense. I think you would get the same thing with Draymond and Jaren Jackson Jr., but possibly even a level up with Draymond Green being a better defender than Brandon Clark. And then you get the playmaking on the offensive end as well. I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of the idea at first, but as I think through it a little bit more and knowing what we know about the Grizzlies now, it probably would have been a solid move.
Hindsight's 2020, as they always like to say. Let Damichael and I know on X. Hit us up in the comments. Are you agreeing with Draymond Green? Do you agree with our perspective that maybe it would be nice to have him say those things in Beale Street Blue at this moment? Again, given what the Grizzlies are currently going through, anybody that seems like they could say something of value leadership-wise has a little bit more value than maybe it would have had a week or two ago. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we will preview Grizzlies Heat. The last time these two teams met, I was there in person in Memphis. It was Tony Allen jersey retirement night. It was a flashback to TA's defensive heyday. Miami is a different team now, and so is Memphis. What will that look like? We'll talk about it next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Daylight savings was a few weeks ago. I don't know about you, partner. I'm still feeling that loss of sleep. It's probably because I'm old and washed and broken. 5 Hour Energy has your back just like it has mine. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes need a little bit of a boost to power through. Whether you're staying up late to watch basketball, squeezing in a round of golf after work, or just trying to keep up with your kids like me, 5 Hour Energy gives you that quick, refreshing pick-me-up whenever you need it. I've been staying up late pretty regular, getting things done for the podcast, writing, all sorts of stuff. Plus, sometimes you get sucked into a good basketball game. 5 Hour Energy helps keep you up the next day. And whether you're out traveling or you're competing or whatever the case might be, 5 Hour Energy is easy to grab and keeps you feeling refreshed. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, or peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack delivered right to your door. If you need one now, you can grab a 5 Hour Energy shot at your local grocery or convenience store. They're literally everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized with 5 Hour Energy. All right, Damichael, the Memphis Grizzlies have released the following injury report for the game coming up against the Heat.
Yep.
It's nice to see it so small, not going to lie, in terms of Grizzlies rostered players. Brandon Clark, we know about with the PCL sprain. And then, of course, Vince Williams Jr. out due to illness. It seems like John Conchar is on the up and up from his bout with illness earlier this week. No Ja Morant, no Desmond Bane, no Jaren Jackson Jr. Those are certainly the names of biggest consequence at this stage of the season. The last time these two teams met, it was Saturday, March 15th. I was there in Memphis, hanging out with you a little bit. The Grizzlies won by 34 points, knocking off this Miami Heat team. However, Damichael, the season for the two squads has shifted a bit since that game. In fairness, Miami lost 3 games following that one, but here is the Heat's record over their last 5 games. Win, admittedly not including their first game of a back-to-back, which they're playing against the Boston Celtics they did play against the Boston Celtics, on Wednesday night. So the Grizzlies have the advantage of being in Miami before the Miami Heat are. They are in Boston on Wednesday, and then obviously the Heat fly home to play the Grizzlies on Thursday. It's going to be an interesting game for that reason, a chance for them to pick up a win, them being the Grizzlies. How do they get it done? Is it as simple as, hey, look over here. Remember when you were good? Remember when you were not a bad basketball team? Check this out. You guys did good things here. Is it as easy as that? Do you play some Future and some Lupe Fiasco and maybe see if the juices get flowing? Or do you have to tweak things with the new head coach,
Yeah.
Do we continue to see the shortened rotation? Essentially, an 8-man rotation was deployed against the Warriors. Do we continue to see that against the Heat? What are some of your thoughts going into tonight's game with Miami?
They're trending up. The energy in that game against the Warriors was solid for the second leg of a back to back. Like you could tell they wanted to win, and clearly in the locker room that was expressed. Guys didn't have a lot to say. After that loss, to the Warriors. And I'm talking about the guys that you usually talk to and get a lot from. So this is tough. One of the players just said, "Man, I just want to win." Like that's where they are. They just want to win right now. Like it's not about, oh, we're getting closer or we're getting better. They just want to win. So I think the hunger is there. I know some people would look at the games and the results and say I disagree, but I'm telling you what I see. You see frustration. It's piling up on these players' faces. They're sick of loss after loss. One player said, "This ain't us. This ain't us. This is not the Memphis Grizzlies." So I think there's a pride part of things that'll kick in. And this is a game that they should win. You mentioned that Miami's been playing better basketball, and I expected that to happen at some point because despite all those struggles that we saw, Miami was still a talented team. Bam Adebayo, Khalil Ware, front court. You got Tyler Hero, Duncan Robinson, some of the better shooters, in the league. Andrew Wiggins kind of being that two-way player for them. Like they have pieces over there. So it's a game that it should be served as an interesting contest, for Memphis. But I'm expecting the Grizzlies, if they play like they did against the Warriors and for a decent chunk of that game against the Celtics, before the Celtics broke that game open, they're probably going to come out to win.
You would think so. Obviously, the injury report is going to bear watching. Second night of a back-to-back for Miami.
That's going to be important for Miami. Yep.
Guys that aren't playing against the Boston Celtics on Wednesday include Duncan Robinson, Andrew Wiggins. Those have been two pretty big components of the Heat's run of late. Not going to be potentially in the lineup against the Grizzlies. How important is it for Memphis? Because, again, I mentioned the 5 wins going into the Boston game. The Heat beat the Hornets, right? The Hornets are a bad basketball team. The Hawks, I guess, are technically not a bad basketball team, but they are a bad basketball team.
Yeah.
You've got the 76ers, who are the walking wounded at this point. The Wizards are a bad basketball team. So Miami is knocking off the teams that they're supposed to beat. The best win of their last 5 going into the Celtics game was the Warriors, but I believe in that contest, and I will confirm that right now. Not sure that Steph Curry played in that game.
I don't think he played.
He did not. And obviously that was a major change, right? A major shift. No Steph in that game. That
it was supposed to be the Jimmy Butler get-back game, but yeah.
Right, and it was not. So I do think that availability is going to be a major piece of it. I want to continue to see what Zach Edey can do, right? Zach Edey has been invested in by Isolo. Zach Edey is someone who 4 blocks, 16 rebounds.
Yeah.
The unique thing about him is how he continues to get comfortable defensively, because that's his biggest hang up right now. On the offensive end, obviously as a rebounder, and then even as a shot blocker, he's looking better than he has all season long. But there's no denying that opposing teams are hunting him in pick and roll. He's not hedging fast enough. If all you do is play straight drop coverage against the likes of Tyler Hero, Terry Rozier, they're going to fillet you pretty easily. How he continues to evolve is going to be my biggest thing to watch in this one, because if he can get back up close to Jalen Wells in terms of value as a rookie, that's going to make all the difference for Memphis, whether in the playoffs or the play-in.
I think that's a fair point. Offensively, he's much more comfortable now. I was talking to him, about this, after the last game, and he was talking about, you're a football coach. You might like this word usage, but he said the Grizzlies are kind of, giving him the ability to headhunt now, the freedom to headhunt. He's talking about as a screen setter, like he can just go, give guys blows, and if you watch the Grizzlies possession by possession, you see Zach Edey setting sometimes 3 screens, sometimes even 4 screens within one possession, and he's rolling to the basket. He was telling me, after that last game, he was like, yeah, if you go look at the numbers at Purdue, I was like 99 percentile in rolling, and that is a fact. He was very elite in that category. So you're seeing the Grizzlies play more into those strengths, whereas in the past it was not as much pick and roll. Every now and then we'll mix it in, but spacing, cutting, you see him at the 3-point line, you see him kind of duck in, for post touches every now and then, and that was kind of his role, but it's a little bit modified now. That's the first possession of the last two games. And so pay attention to the very first possession of this game, because it's going to be a set for them more than likely, especially if they get the tip. But the first possession has been Zach Edey setting 2, 3, 4 screens each time. So he's much more comfortable on that end. Defense is still TBD to me. We'll see, how that goes. I think just pretty much throughout the rest of the season, he's going to have limitations on that end. That's just going to be something that's just going to be a thing early on in his career, at least. But offensively, is where I'm more kind of in tune to his progression and the opportunity that he's getting.
They're going to keep investing in him, at least as long as Isolo is the head coach of the Memphis Grizzlies, which maybe will be for a while. We'll talk more about that, I'm sure, down the road. Thank you so much for being with us on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. On our next episode, it'll be a Got to Get Down on Friday edition of the podcast. We'll talk Grizzlies Heat. Memphis has a pretty big game coming up this weekend against one of the young upstarts in the NBA. I do believe it's the Detroit Pistons that they take on Saturday night. Correct me if I'm wrong, partner.
That's right. That's
correct.
In Detroit.
So maybe we can revisit the JB Bickerstaff years a little bit in Memphis and how what he did with the Grizzlies is translating to the Pistons. Lots of different angles we can take going into the weekend on our Friday edition of the podcast.
And maybe we'll get an answer on this Ja thing or whatever the case may be. So, maybe we'll confirm and say, hey, I told you guys it was nothing. Or then we'll have Joe or possibly even me blowing up if this really becomes anything. So we'll see. I'm over here rolling my eyes. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what the league comes to a conclusion about on this thing.
The worst commissioner in professional sports. You never know when it comes to Adam Silver. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing, wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. Make sure you're checking out LockedOnDaily.com, our free daily newsletter, Memphis Grizzlies words from me, NBA analysis, and so much more over at LockedOnDaily.com, fantasy basketball advice, and more. LockedOnDaily.com. Subscribe to the Locked On Grizzlies newsletter. For Damichael Cole, I am Joe Mullinax. Stay locked in. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. Hopefully we are feeling a little better about things heading into the weekend edition of the show. Have a good one. Catch you back here tomorrow.